Better than what? Well, I suppose better than I was expecting it to be. I got roasted about 18 months ago when I reviewed the venerable Interceptor 650 and dared to suggest that it might possibly be underpowered and, at least here in Europe, overpriced. And as the Super Meteor is based loosely on the Interceptor, to be honest, I wasn't holding my breath. You see, the problem was that in addition to being decidedly unimpressed by the Interceptor, I've never really bonded with cruisers. I know there are lots of die-hard aficionados out there, and I've got several friends who ride them, and that's great. It's just that personally, and remember this is just my opinion, I don't know where I'd go on one. What sort of ride are they designed for exactly? But against all the odds, I was actually pleasantly surprised. First off, it has to be said that, unlike the Interceptor, this is a big, imposing bike that belies its relatively small capacity engine. It's low and moody, especially in this dark green that could pass for black in all but the brightest sunshine. It's a substantial piece of machinery, although the low seat height means that swinging your right leg over is a breeze, and flat footing, of course, is a doddle. The feet forward riding position reminded me a bit of my Honda ADV scooter, only with my bum lower to the ground and my hands a bit higher up. The second thing that struck me was the fit and finish. Royal Enfield have really pushed the boat out in terms of perceived quality here, a significant step up from the Interceptor and Continental GT, and even the 350 range, Hunter, Meteor, etc., which for some reason have always had a better fit and finish than the larger capacity bikes. The left and right switchgear surrounds are metal, for example, something you rarely see even on much more expensive bikes. The grips are old school balloon type, which look the part and are very comfortable to hold, and this rear light just looks right. The mirrors feel solid and don't vibrate, although they're positioned slightly unusually, so the view out of them takes a bit of getting used to. They've thought to give the radiator a plastic guard as standard, and both the clutch and brake levers are adjustable for reach. I usually have to buy both of these as aftermarket add-ons, even on much more expensive bikes, so well done Enfield. The riding position is more natural and less uncomfortable than I found on the Harley-Davidson Sportster S, for example, that I tested about 18 months ago. The stretch to both the foot pegs and handlebars is thankfully much less pronounced. The Harley literally gave me lower back pain after 2 minutes, but I was fine on this Super Meteor, at least for the time I had it. I'm not sure my lower back would want to rack up hundreds of kilometres in this position without a break, but I suppose cruisers are designed for mega miles. I also didn't find the seat to be quite as comfortable as it looks, if that makes sense. It's very wide towards the rear, and overall it's about the same shape and size as the seat on my ADV. It's fine, just slightly less well padded and not quite as comfortable as it appears. The front brake, you still only get one disc despite the not inconsiderable curb weight of 241 kilos. Yeah, it's okay, but it lacks the meat of a twin disc setup. I don't know if it's a cruiser thing. The Sportster S only had one disc as well, but I just don't get it. Surely it's not that expensive to put a second disc on. I know it adds yet more weight, but it's a cheap way of suddenly getting twice the stopping power. Fortunately, the rear brake on the Super Meteor is very good, so I've found myself using that more often. Now, I should point out that this was a brand new bike with literally 1 kilometre on the clock when I got it, so nothing was worn in, nothing was broken in, brakes, tyres, gear change or suspension. But everything seemed okay. The gear change was good, and fortunately my bike didn't have the optional heel and toe shifter, which I tried once and didn't really get on with. The budget Seat Zoom Cruise tyres did a good enough job, but I mean, as you can see, conditions were perfect. And I personally would want something a little bit more upmarket if it were my bike, especially for the wet. The speedometer is lifted straight from the Hunter 350. It's analog, and you get a smallish monochrome LCD display in the centre with all the other information except the revs. I suppose a bike like this isn't really about revving, even if this particular twin wouldn't object, but it's something I'm used to. My scooter has a rev counter and it doesn't even have any gears. You do get a turn-by-turn GPS, which is better than nothing, I suppose, but I've read on forums that it's not always that reliable, and if it's anything like the B-Line I tried a couple of years ago, you'd probably be better off using Google Maps on your phone, or following a mate who knows where they're going. So what about the engine? The engine I so decried in my Interceptor video and got roasted for. People got most irate and insisted that 48 horsepower and 52 newton meters of torque is ample on the public roads. Well, I'm sorry, I don't think it is. Put a pillion on the back or even a bit of luggage, and there's really not much margin for error, let alone margin for fun, with chunky machines like these. Okay, admittedly, it's less of a concern on a laid-back cruiser than it is on a bike built ostensibly for intercepting or crossing continents, but it's still right on the edge of being underpowered in my books. Honda's CB500 range can get away with 48 horsepower because they weigh 40 or 50 kilos less. With this Super Meteor, you need to be prepared to take things steady or change down a couple of gears. Twisting the throttle to catch up with your mates on a group ride, for example, won't give you anything like the quick spurt of acceleration you need to catch them up. You do accelerate, of course, but in a most genteel fashion. And in case you're wondering, I rode to the Enfield dealer on my 30 horsepower ADV scooter, not the Speed Twin 1200. Despite the relatively modest headline figures though, this engine is supremely tractable. What about suspension? Again, it's fine. It's set up for comfort and stability, and that's a good thing. The upside down shower forks can't be adjusted, but they are remarkably forgiving, while the preload adjustable rear shocks offered a surprising degree of comfort, far superior, for example, to the spine-jarring ride of the Sportster S. And stability is excellent too, aided by the generous 1500mm wheelbase. By way of a comparison, that's 70mm more than my Speed Twin. Handling is good, despite the somewhat unwieldy dimensions, although I was acutely aware of the limited ground clearance, very limited ground clearance, on roundabouts and tight bends, especially as this was literally a brand new bike. Any scrapes and scratches when I brought it back, and I'd be paying for them. The exhaust note is beefy, very nice, without being, dare I say, Harley obnoxious. Just what a cruiser should be in my books. The chrome header pipes look the part and complement the dark paintwork and black engine a treat. Enfield have also ditched the polished alloy clutch cover on the Interceptor and Continental GT that I said looked like a giant Kinder Egg, in favour of this much more subtle gunmetal grey version. So overall, the Super Meteor is a good bike to ride. Good, but not great. But I think that this is the sort of machine that won't be bought with mega miles in mind. This is the sort of bike you fall for in the showroom because you like the rear light, or the deep blue paintwork, or the tank logo, or the chrome details. And I'm not denying that it is a very well finished, handsome motorcycle. If you're the kind of owner who keeps an eye on Motone Customs' website for the latest solid brass valve covers or over-engineered bar end plugs, then the Super Meteor will be right up your street, and you won't care one hoot that it's only got 48 horsepower. And I think you'll also have to exhibit similar stoicism when it comes to the purchase price. The model I tried, the mid-spec Interstellar, is €7,850, €30 more than the Honda Hornet I tested last week. Yes, I know, two completely different bikes, no solid brass valve caps for the Hornet, but it does make you think, doesn't it? Twice the power for the same money? I'm not trying to compare the two bikes, but I know which one I'd rather ride every day. That said, if you're into cruisers but balk as I would at the idea of spending $16,000 on an entry-level Harley, then try one of these at half the price. The Super Meteor didn't quite manage to convince me that cruisers are for me, but I do think this is Royal Enfield's best bike to date. It's good looking, a lot of attention has been paid to detail, there are some decent components if you overlook the tyres, and the fit and finish is excellent. If this is an indication of where Enfield is heading, then it augurs well. And they're pretty much all on their own when it comes to, for want of a better word, beginner cruisers. There's Honda's 500 Rebel for €1,000 less, but it doesn't look as good as this, and it's a much smaller bike. What we could really do with now is a Hyper Meteor with around 65-70 horsepower and some Michelin tyres, but as it stands now, the Super Meteor is already a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching.